Welcome all to Interfaith Council for Peace in the Middle East monthly meeting. I'm Holly Gigante, and I want to thank Cleveland Peace Action for Zooming this connection and for our presenters, Sam Bahour in Palestine and Don Bryant, who recently visited Sam in Palestine, as well as a number of other friends and colleagues. Many of you may know Sam, a Youngstown, Ohio native who has given lectures while returning from 4 hometown visits. And Don's been an activist for over 40 years, Palestine being one issue close to his heart. The mic's all yours, gentlemen.
Thank you, Holly. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see everyone. I'm going to run through just a brief PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll have Sam on after that, and he's going to go a little more in depth. So let me find my PowerPoint in 1 second here. Okay. That's not it. Hang on a sec. So let's see. Sorry about that. Zoom. Come on, where are we at here? Zoom meeting. Share. Oh, here we go. All right. Yay for technology, I guess. Now let me just. Okay. And as you see, they are captioned, so I will speak sometimes. I traveled to Palestine to occupied Palestine during Ramadan this past season, this past March. And my first stop was in Bethlehem. And Sabeel from either one of the Carolinas, I think it was South Carolina, came when I was there. And Mazda said, "Don, you could lead the tour." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I've only been here 2 days," but I showed him what I knew, and some others joined in and showed him a established wetland that was put in. And on Fridays, we have the students. Uh-oh, did we lose the picture? Okay, and I was pleased to join the students, and they're learning about recycling. Hold on 1 second. We lost something here in the room.
It'll come back.
It'll be back. So folks in the room, if you just want to look at my pictures here, I'm going to keep going. So this brings us, these flowers were blooming, the anemone, and I thought they were poppies, and I was informed that they were not. But the reason I'm even bringing this up again is because it was Mother's Day in occupied Palestine when I went. And, you know, the springtime, like we have here, Mother's Day tomorrow, springtime is the time of Mother's Day. And I stayed with the mom on the second part of my visit, and she was delighted to say that 2 of her daughters have returned to live in Palestine with their families. And guess what? Now she's a grandmother a couple times from those 2 daughters and their husbands. And her third son, Khalid, is still in Texas, but he travels back and forth from time to time. So I guess you could say one of the things that parents love is when when their children return to Palestine, to occupied Palestine. So not only was this museum showing the natural history of the area, but also was live creatures there. And we got to take care of some hyenas while I was there. And they were now 2 years old, and here they are. They've since been released, but we fed them raw meat every day. They're nocturnal, so they didn't really come out to eat at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when we went by. And it was a male and a female. And I suggested releasing them and other wild animals up at that illegal settlement up on the hill in Bethlehem, but I don't think that happened. Everything was composted. This is not only a room with a view, but a compostable toilet. So yes, and as you know, the peace sign means victory, and this is victory with justice for the Palestinian people. I finally traveled outside of the compound after 2 days, and this was also the same time that apartheid Israel broke the ceasefire that had negotiated with Hamas regarding the attacks in Gaza. So I did we were posting from Cleveland Peace Action on Instagram. I was, and I made my first post, or actually my second or third post, when I found that that picture of the martyr. Oops, I wanted to go back to that. Well, sorry, I'm moving forward, trying to go back. There we go. As I was walking down the one of the streets in Bethlehem, I saw this, so I videoed my my words about the ceasefire breaking and the return to genocide in Gaza with this picture of this young man who was killed at 15 years old by Israeli snipers. And the settlements are encroaching everywhere, as you see. So the next part of my journey was I traveled to Ramallah and to Albiere, which is where the Palestinian Memory, the Museum for Palestinian Memory, was run by Amal Wadan, who's a former Clevelander, along with her husband Mohammed. And when they returned to their family home in Albiere in 2013. We have a wonderful virtual museum and a in-person museum, and it will be stored in this building here as soon as it gets off its feet. Right now, the virtual museum is 80% completed in Arabic, 20% in English, and it shows the virtual museum on the website shows the different cities of 675 villages that were displaced in 1948. And here's just a few examples of what you would see on the museum website, along with other cultural information for each city. The reason we need to recognize these is because apartheid Israel is seeking to erase all of Palestine by building places right on top of, such as Deir Yassin. We just watched a movie, Born in Deir Yassin, and there's a mental hospital on top of where Deir Yassin's at. So they'll put parking lots up. They'll plant conifers where olive trees are supposed to grow, and it's not native. And they got rid of the natives people and the other native structures as well, and infrastructure of the Palestinians that preceded the Israeli occupation of Palestine, historic Palestine, and occupied Palestine and Gaza. So yes, it was Ramadan. I was graciously treated by Palestinian friends. I met up with Amal and I and Mohammed, met up with Fawaz Damra, who was deported from the US. He was the sheikh at the Islamic Center of Cleveland. And he got caught up in anti-Islamic discrimination of the new immigration and customs enforcement that President Bush put into effect. And of course, after 9/11, they were going after Palestinians across the country. And we saw this road where the settlers came in from the settlements on the hill near Albiere into the Amari refugee camp, which houses people that were displaced from the Rumla district in 1948 Palestine. Buildings set afire by the settlers. So there are two Palestinian families that have sought to stay in. Here's the one house of a Palestinian I'm pointing the cursor at. And the second family is here with the solar panels. And the name of the settlement is Bet El, and it is a military outpost as well. Martyrs Square. Of course, martyrs are recognized everywhere throughout occupied Palestine. And we know that the UN has been assisting refugees since 48, and now has been accused of being connected to Hamas, and there's no evidence of this. But it turns out that that's a big plan by the US and Israel to bring in their own food distributors like Blackwater type companies. And, as you heard, the new Netanyahu plan, and to put everyone in Gaza into one little corner of the place of Gaza, and use US contractors to give them portions of food. And that's the sign on the entrance to the refugee camp in Albiere. We did come across a checkpoint, and people start to turn around. You might hear your GPS saying rerouting, checkpoint ahead. So there you go. While I was there, the gentleman was attacked and arrested. Attacked by settlers and arrested by the Israeli occupation forces, since released. He's the co-director of No Other Land, Hamdan Bilal. I'm going to go quickly through my Gaza slides from 2009, because I don't want to take up Sam's time. Yeah. So you know that the Israeli gunboats are on the Mediterranean Sea, where the fishermen need to fish. So it's really hard to make a living as a fisherman, obviously, right? And we were in Al Shifa Hospital back in 2009. And I did organize with Amal Wadan to have a delegation to Palestine. And we stayed in Rafah when we entered with Abdul Rahman's family, who I met in Cleveland at a rally we were having. He came up to me at a rally we were having for Gaza, and he said, "Hey, I'm from Gaza." And he was going to Cleveland State University to finish his degree. So we became friends ever since, stayed with his family, as I said. It's over 51,000 confirmed dead, and could be as much as 100,000, as you know, by the Lancet reports, documentations. So we fight back wherever we can. We'll do banner drops. We do lighting projections with Backbone campaign. I have the lighting projections to be able to do that. So we've been doing that all over town. And I will stop there and would like to ask Sam to join us on Zoom. And I think we'll probably need, Sam, do you have a PowerPoint?
I do. If you can give me co-host.
Yes, absolutely. And Sam is from Youngstown. And I got to meet Sam in Ramallah, and he told us about the business in Palestine has dropped by 60%. And he will go into more detail. And I asked him today where his family was from, because we often ask Palestinians where their family's from. And he said his dad is from Albiere, which is where I went. And mom is US Lebanese American. So let's give Sam screen share. Oops, sorry. I went to the wrong place.
No,
Okay, I'm making you host.
There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. When I met Don here last week or 2 weeks ago, we were speaking about the economic environment, which is something that a lot of our solidarity community doesn't get the vantage point of. So my presentation today is going to be about economic justice in Palestine. The presentation, I'm going to go through it quickly because I think you have some of the background information because of who you are. But nonetheless, I'll go through it in a structured way. Let me just open it up here. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. If you can mute Don, that would be great. And Marlon as well. Okay. As I noted, my presentation is titled Economic Justice in Palestine. I start with this photo, which is a photo from about 6-7 years ago that I've been using constantly. It's from a dear friend of mine, Maham Henna. And I start with this because I want to make a point, and this is before October 7th, that when you look at this picture, what's behind this picture, you would imagine would be like Cyprus, Greece, Italy, because this is the Mediterranean and we're on the Mediterranean. So one would imagine what's behind this is just as extravagant as all of those other tourist locations. Okay, see how I can get this moving here. This is Gaza about 8 months ago. It's worse today. And this was a message that Meha sent me a while back here in the middle of the war. She lost family members, lost her house, many injured in her family as well. Meha is not in Gaza. She's actually in Canada trying to finish her PhD while she's watching her home and her family decimated. So we have a small campaign to try to help her finish her studies. This was Rafah, the southern tip of the Gaza Strip before October 7th and today. There's nothing left. And this is exactly what they're threatening to do to the rest of Gaza. And they're not far away from that anyway. I don't have to go through the history because I always talk about economy in a political economy context. That's how we learned it in school. For some reason, when we graduate, the politicians go one direction and the economists go another direction. I'm going to bring it back because anywhere we talk about an economy, there's a political context to it, all the more here. And I say it's important here because where we are, that tiny orange 2 spots on the left side of the map, in context of the Middle East and Iran and Turkey, this is a tiny, tiny, tiny location. Under the scrutiny of the entire world for more than 77 years. It's not an issue of resources needed to resolve this. It's an issue of political will, of not wanting to resolve this. And you'll see that as I go forward. I always start my presentations before 1948 because there's a misnomer that Palestine was born when Israel was created. That's not the case. These are the districts of all of Palestine from the river to the sea before there was anything called Israel. And then as you all know, in General Assembly Resolution 181 of 1947, the UN had a bright idea to divide historic Palestine into an Arab state and a Jewish state. That was the map. By the way, it is the only written definition of a 2-state solution in international law. And that's how it looked. This gave Israel about 54% of historic Palestine. In that resolution, it talks about an Arab state and a Jewish state, but it doesn't define either, which is problematic because if you say Arab, you can mean Saudi Arabian, and if you mean Jewish, you can mean New Yorker. So I'm not sure exactly how to read that. Israel said it accepted this resolution, but of course it didn't. It engaged in an aggressive war in 1948, and instead of settling with 54% of the land, it took 78% of the land. as what we know today as Israel. And in 1967, they occupied that gray part, and now they are in control from the river to the sea. Today, if we look at the West Bank, that's a picture of the West Bank. It's not much of a picture. This is a map, I believe, from OSHA, the UN agency in Jerusalem, which does all the authoritative mapping here. And this is an interactive map. So it starts out just with the empty West Bank, and every time you click a button, it adds a layer of settlements, a layer of network roads of settlers, a layer of settlements, a layer of earth mounds, etc., etc., etc. The final product is this. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you my blog. And if you go there, there's a link to that interactive map if you'd like to look at it. This is the result of 30 years of the US monopolizing what was supposed to be a peace process. Of course, it wasn't peace. It was just a process of never-ending continuation of entrenching the Israeli occupation. So we go from left to right. We start with Palestine, and we end up with Swiss cheese, which is a very bad looking Swiss cheese as well. And I quote Chris Hedges, which says, "You can't talk about hope until you see reality, and reality is pretty bleak." But that's the starting point. That can't be more true than after Gaza now. Where we're starting from is at a very, very low point, and that's reality. Israel had its own definition of a map. This was 1 month before October 7th. Netanyahu stood up in front of the UN General Assembly and showed a map that didn't have the West Bank, didn't have Gaza, didn't have Palestinians. It had only Israel from the river to the sea. But it didn't tick anyone off in America. Historic stages that we've gone through, so I can get to the economic discussion very quickly. Pre-1948, which is where I started before, we were an organically developed society as part of a region. We were mainly agricultural in our economic activity. Two books I point to as Hidden Histories and What is Modern Israel. All the books I'm going to list, you'll find them on my blog, so don't worry about writing them down. And then we had 1948. And that's when Israel was created and our refugees were created as well. The characteristics of this phase was shock and the start of Palestinian fragmentation. Ilan Pappé's Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine documents that using declassified documents from the Israeli archives. The book is amazingly footnoted, but don't rush to look at a footnote and go find the actual document. After they released the documents and Ilan Pappé went and actually wrote about it, they reclassified the documents, much of them. So, I mean, are they hiding something? I would imagine. And the other book I point to here is Stranger in My Own Land, which is a rather new book by a dear friend of mine, Fida Gideus. It is an amazing memoir of a family that encompasses all the aspects of the Palestinian struggle. Someone who was close to Arafat, a fighter, a diaspora person. I won't go through the whole story, but it's very well worth reading. Then we had, from 1967 to 1993, the phase of occupation, full occupation by the Israeli military. And here Israel tried to normalize the occupation. They tried to tell people, it's not that bad. The Arabs are better off than the rest of the Arab world. And the characteristics of this period was more fragmentation because we had more refugees after 1967 and forced dependency. Thus, we were being taxed by the military occupation, but we had zero representation. I have two daughters in Boston and they took me on a tour. I found that no taxation without representation was a theme in that tour. Two books I point to here is Kingdoms of Olive and Ash, which is written by award-winning writers who came here in the 50th anniversary of the occupation. There's one chapter in here about me. Somebody wrote a chapter about what one day looks like for a Palestinian business person. That chapter is in this book, and it's also in the literary hub that you can find by Googling "The Tallest Man in Ramallah," which is the title. And also you'll find that on my blog. The other book, which I highly recommend, is The Case for Palestine by international lawyer John Quigley, a friend from Columbus. This is a handbook for the legal case surrounding the Palestinians. And then we had from the Oslo period, when Oslo was signed, until today, and I had actually written this A3 a while back, several years back. I characterized what's happening by apartheid, annexation, and annihilation. And annihilation is actually what the UN started to use yesterday in a statement. The two books I point to is one on the left by co-author Francesca Albanese. She's an international lawyer who's very outspoken today. She's today the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine, on the occupied territory. This is a handbook on refugees. Anything you want to know about refugees is in this book. And on the right here, Moment of Truth by Jamie Weiner. This is a book which is interesting because as from 1994 until a little bit before today, about 20, 25 years of negotiating, on the ground, Israel didn't stop entrenching the occupation. So Moment of Truth actually documents what was Israel doing on the ground as their negotiators were jumping from capital to capital, pretending like they were talking about peace. So getting into the economic stuff, on the left here, and I always start again, pre-1948, on the left there is the train schedule from Palestine to a lot of locations. That's a lot of locations for a land without a people. If you recall, the Israelis, the Zionist movement said this was a land with no people for a people with no land. A lot of those non-people were going to a lot of places. On the right is a picture of Bethlehem at the time. Those look like people to me. Economically, cotton was a major harvest in Palestine, a major product, and that's in Kufr Saba. That no longer is the case. Jaffa has always been the bride of Palestine, known for its fishing and for its orange exportation. Jaffa oranges basically were branded as such and still today have some brand value, and watermelons as well. A friend of mine, Zahi Khouri, wrote this in Haaretz back in 2023. He speaks of his grandfather, who in 1923, before Israel was established, ran a company or was a co-founder of a company where there were 6 Palestinian Christians and Muslims and Palestinian Jews equally represented on this board of the company called the Timber Company, just to show you that there was life before Israel, and it also was working for the benefit of all the communities. Was it perfect? Of course not. But did it exist? Yes, and it's been brushed off so we don't think about it. Then we have from 1948 to 1966. It hurts me to show this picture because we're seeing the same pictures today. Refugeedom. 750,000 Palestinians expelled or fled and ended up in the surrounding areas. These pictures are pleasant compared to what we're seeing today. The UN was created. Actually, Israel begged for the UN UNRWA organization to be created. They wanted a body to take care of the Palestinian refugees so they wouldn't have to. Fast forward 77 years later, and now they're just trying to dismantle UNRWA, thinking that if UNRWA disappears, Palestinian refugees will disappear, which is not the case. Palestinians, nonetheless, started to rebuild their lives with school. Just think of that. Think of going to school, open air, in a hot area on rocks. That's how much we value education. And then in 1966, the Palestinians, the Israelis found some Palestinian inside Israel to sign off on a document, because from 1948 to 1966, Palestinians who remained in Israel were put under military rule. And so they ended it here, and they took the whole system of that military rule and just transferred it to the occupied territory. Today, I got this picture in 2024, and it hurts to look at this. Again, Palestinians are trying to learn in the rubble of their homes, and they can't even do it collectively because of what's happening. A powerful statement, in my opinion. 1967 is when the occupation started, and basically we became workers for the Israeli economy, and we were doing the dirty jobs, the construction, the plumbing, a little bit of light industry. There was a lot of Palestinians working in agriculture and a lot of sweatshops. Some sweatshops inside Israel and other sweatshops in the West Bank that would do the work, send the final product to Israel. Israel would tag them as made in Israel and send them off to Kaufman's and Strauss and all of those companies. And then we have from 1993 until today, a more modern economy. This is when the Palestinian Authority was created, and people on the ground felt like we were heading to statehood, or at least that's what we were building for. The top picture there is Unipal, which is one of the major distribution companies here. They represent Unipal, Procter & Gamble, Kraft, a lot of the US companies. Picture below that is Paltel. That's the company that I helped create. I came from the US to establish this company. I was employee number 001. Actually, I came with the current Prime Minister of Palestine, Dr. Mohammed Mustafa. He and I came together and we established this company. Bottom left there, if you've come to Palestine, you will have eaten kanafe, which is like our national sweet. And that guy actually exists in Nablus, which is the best place for that dish. And fishermen, and on the middle there in the bottom is a plastics factory in Hebron. On the right there is a software company. Two people went to San Francisco University, got a degree, came back in the first Intifada and established Bisan Systems, which today is a leading software as a solution accounting package or ERP package. And it is online, and it's in every language. So basically, you can get your accounting software from a Palestinian company if you wanted to. Picture above that we're proud of. It's products from Canon Free Trade. Why are we proud of it? Because if you walk into any Whole Foods store in the US, you'll find this product. And we're pretty proud that they got into that retail chain. And then on the top there is Jasser Palace. On the right, a very famous palace, historic palace that was renovated as a hotel on the same time that the second Intifada started. It hasn't seen a day of rest yet. And in the middle picture there is Jerusalem Pharmaceuticals. We have about 4 or 5 very, very successful pharmaceutical companies here. And in the middle, that magazine is called This Week in Palestine. Highly recommended. It's the best English publication we have. You can download them for free, but I highly suggest that you subscribe to it. And every edition has a theme. This one is about entrepreneurship in Palestine. So what are the sectors overall in Palestine? Tourism. Tourism is the main sector, not because we're gurus in tourism, but rather because we had a few prophets die here, and now we're stuck with them forever. So we're building a tourism sector around them. Services. We're an economy which is under distress, and we have a lot of new development happening, which requires modern services, and that has been booming. We've also had agriculture, which will always be a sector here. However, when I came here in 1995, it was 12% of the GDP. Today, it is 2%. Why? Because what's agriculture all about? It's about land, water, labor, and movement of goods. Israel controls all 4 of those elements. Thus, by design, they made sure that our agricultural sector stays in distress. Financial sector is very, very well developed here. I actually sit on a board of one of the banks. There's insurance sector, microfinance sector. ICT is a booming sector. It was actually booming in Gaza more than the West Bank, because Gaza was under siege for 16 years before this onslaught. The younger generation adopted the digital economy as a way to connect to the outside world. The best universities we have in IT were in Gaza. And maybe that's why the 5 universities were totally destroyed in the first period of the war. Light industry, like those pharmaceutical companies. And at the end of the day, we're building a country. So construction, building materials, and energy are going to be sectors that are thriving forever, especially now with Gaza. The landmass here is about 6,000 kilometers squared. To give you a feel, it's like the area between Delaware and Rhode Island. It's nothing. It's a peanuts at the end of the day. We're 15 million in total. Sadly, that number, Palestine, 5.4, which is the West Bank and Gaza. I need to go back and update my presentation and reduce that by 100,000 people. Just let that sit for a second. Nobody reduces their population except us. Israel, there's about 2 million Palestinians, mostly Christian and Muslims, inside Israel. We have 5 million refugees around the world, like my parents in Ohio. I'm sorry, 2.6 million diaspora, like my parents in Ohio. Our GDP is about $17 billion. That's peanuts in the economic sense. Israel's GDP is over 520 billion. So we're about 3% of the Israeli economy in size. Our GDP is about $2,800 per person. Israel's is around $52,000 per person. So although our cost structure is the same as Israel's cost structure, we only get paid about 5% of what they get paid. So the West Bank and Gaza is on the right there, just to show you again the map, and to make a point yet again that the Gaza Strip has the same land area as Las Vegas, but more than 3 times the population. We're in an economic stranglehold. Palestine imports about 70% of our economy. Of that, 54% comes directly from Israel. They make it difficult for us to import from abroad, but they make it super easy for us to import from Israeli companies by design, so they can promote their industry and not give us a connection smoothly with the outside world. We export about 20% of our economy, and 88% of that goes to Israel. A lot of it gets sold in Israel, but even more gets labeled as made in Israel and goes out as an Israeli product. And that's everything from textiles to furniture to stone and marble. Almost every one of our sectors is marketed through Israel abroad. The informal economy here is as large or larger than the formal economy. Just keep that in mind, because as you're driving around here, you'll say, it doesn't look like an impoverished place. I mean, there's buildings coming up, there's new cars in the street, and that's largely due to the fact that there's an informal economy here, an economy that doesn't get registered on the books. And we can talk about that later. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, actually wrote a report on that. So from an economic reality perspective, when I took my MBA, they told me, when you want to go to a new market, look at the laws. So when I looked at the laws here, it wasn't one law. The Ottomans were here for 400 years. They kept some remnants of their laws behind them. For example, if I go get a deed today for a piece of land, it's called a tabo. Tabo is not an Arabic word, it's a Turkish word. The British were here for about 30 years. They left a lot of laws behind them. Jordanian Egyptians after them also left laws. And then when the Palestinian Authority got set up, they tried to legislate everything they could to be able to get rid of those past laws. They never got through at all. And then the Israeli military continues to provide military orders, and those override everything. And those have been coming out ever since 1967. There is a military order for almost anything you can think about. I add to the bodies of law that we need to keep in mind, because I know this is a military occupation, as the international community has designated it, that the Fourth Geneva Convention applies, the Hague Regulations apply, and the last I counted was in September 22, now there's many more, 754 General Assembly resolutions, 97 Security Council resolutions, and 96 Human Rights Council resolutions. Not one has been implemented, not one. No wonder we are where we are today. And then the state of affairs here for the various areas that we're talking about. East Jerusalem was illegally annexed in 1980. Israel just passed a law and said, we're taking East Jerusalem. The entire world said that's illegal. A Security Council resolution was passed, and even the US abstained to allow it to pass. Fast forward 75 years later, and the US moves its embassy to Jerusalem. The West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza have been militarily occupied for 57 years. In 2012, the Palestinians went to the UN and asked the UN to recognize the state of Palestine, and the majority of the countries of the world accepted the state of Palestine, giving us non-member observer status on the way to a full membership. Gaza has been under siege for 16 years plus, and now we have a plausible genocide, as the ICC has stated. Israel does not recognize any of the above statuses. And I should note, neither does the US. Currency. What do we use for currency here? Our shekel, the Israeli shekel, is what we buy our falafel sandwiches with every day. Then we have dollars and Jordanian dinars, which is pegged to the dollar. So if I want to buy a high-ticketed item like a apartment or a car, I would buy that in US dollars because no one buys high-ticketed items or takes financing with shekels. It's too fluctuating. And then there's a lot of activity that happens with Europe, so you'll find people who have euros. We have $6 billion in the Palestinian banking system surplus of shekel. Usually, in a normal society, when a country has too much of another country's currency, they ask the country that owns the currency to exchange it for a different currency. Israel is the only country in the world that refuses to take its own currency. And also, they don't pay us anything for using their currency, like is known in the currency world. Labor, we have about, before the Gaza war, about 200,000 people who go into Israel every day to work. That's where those shekels come from. People go to work, they get paid in shekels, they come back to the West Bank, and they pay for their goods in shekels. We have about 153,000 who actually get permits from the Israeli military to be able to cross a checkpoint, usually at 4 o'clock in the morning, to go to Israel to work. Another 50,000 or so can't get permits because they were arrested at one time by the Israelis. For what do those people do? They go to a hardware store, they pay about $25 and buy a ladder, and they put it up against the $4 billion shekel wall, and just walk over it. Today, even after all workers were stopped after October 7th, some sectors in Israel depend on Palestinian workers, mainly construction and agriculture. So when they saw their sectors were being damaged, they started to allow Palestinians to come back into Israel. Today, you have about 20, 30,000 people who go back and work in Israel. This is a profitable occupation. I could say it was profitable up until October 7th. Israel benefits $5 billion a year from this occupation. If you and I had a business for $5 billion a year, we'd be friends, no matter what we liked or didn't like about each other. And most of that comes from petroleum products, natural gas, and electricity. Last point I want to make is a case in point to bring this home. As I said, I came from the US to establish the telecom sector. And when I read Oslo, I thought, this is a bad agreement. This is not ending the occupation. But then I found article number 36 of Oslo, and it said, Israel recognizes that the Palestinian side has the right to build and operate separate and independent communication systems. And I told my wife, the agreement is not ending the occupation by any stretch of the imagination. But why would they use the words separate and independent if we weren't heading to statehood? 30 years later, I'm no longer with the company, but it is not separate or independent. Why? Because although Israel gave us the right to do that, they remained in control of the airwaves, the frequencies. And if you don't have frequencies, you can't build a mobile network, right? Because our telephones don't have wires, they use the airwaves. Israel controls the land, the water underneath the land, and the airwaves above us. They also control connectivity. If you want to connect different villages or cities together, like Bethlehem to Ramallah, you have to get an Israeli permission for every single link. The requests are taking 12 to 14 months to process. At this pace, we'll have an independent network when kingdom comes. And the flow of human resources. These towers don't get built by themselves. You need to send people to different areas, technicians to work on these. And Israel controls the flow of people here and can disrupt movement over an hour. Things can change without anyone knowing. And then importation. We don't produce telecom equipment, we have to import it, like most countries in the world. And as we import, Israel said, there will be no change. You Palestinians did not have access to the outside world before Oslo. You will not have access during Oslo, and now we know that you're not going to have access after Oslo. This is the Ashdod port in Israel, and this is where products come in from abroad for Israel and for us. And for us, everything has to jump through 3 hoops. Hoop number 1 is customs. We said, yeah, we understand customs. They said, no, but you will not pay customs to the Palestinian government. You will pay customs to the Port Authority of Israel. And at the end of every month, we will deduct 3%, which is a tremendous amount of money, out of your custom fees and transfer the money, your 97%, to the Palestinian Authority. Why is that important? The Palestinian government's budget is built on 70% custom fees. So Israel basically put a faucet on the revenue coming into the Palestinian Authority. And every once in a while, they turn that faucet off. Secondly is standards. They said everything that comes through our ports must meet Israeli standards. Even though they know that the Israeli economy is way up here, it's high tech, it's modern, and they said, we don't care. We understand that you're just starting out, but everything you import must meet first world standards. A nice polite way of saying, or not saying, that you're going to pay out of your ears to build your economy. And the last one is security. The one we like best because we can't explain it. Give you a live example. We ordered some equipment from Ericsson, a company in Europe that sells telecommunication equipment. And by chance, the Israeli operator in Tel Aviv ordered the same new equipment for them. They arrived at the port about the same time. Israeli earmarked equipment from Ericsson cleared the port in about 2 weeks. Same exact model numbers earmarked for the Palestinian Authority telecom company, us, sat at the port for 2 years. That became a lawsuit. So I'll end by going back to Gaza like I started. This is the Gaza that I will remember. It is a colorful, or was a colorful place with one of the most warmest people you can find on earth. They are impoverished, but they understand that they are impoverished because of a political reality, not because they don't have a desire to work. And I will keep giving these talks because this is what Gaza looks like today. This is Rafah. But I give these talks because these kids were from Gaza. I don't know where they are today. They deserve better. I have no idea what happened to these kids. Maybe they're in one of these lines trying to get food because we are in a famine situation. It is dire, dire. But it's not only Gaza. This is Jenin. This is one of our 2 food baskets, Jenin being one and the Jericho area, Jericho Valley being the other. This is Jenin in 2002, not 22, 2002. Israel sent in bulldozers and Caterpillar D9s and basically destroyed most of the center of the camp. If you read the Guardian interview with the bulldozer driver at the time, he was joking. And he said, what are they complaining about? We opened them a new soccer field in the middle of the camp. They should be happy. Fast forward to 2023. Now when they go into the camps, they actually dig up the streets, which means digging up sewage, digging up gas, digging up water, making the camp unlivable. This camp, Jenin, today is empty. They took out 20,000 residents of the camp to be able to blow up houses and open streets so tanks can go through it. These kids are from Jenin, and I'll keep doing this because, again, they deserve better. And I will stop there. That's how you can get in touch with me.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, we put this out so everyone can see your presentation.
Meriden, can you mute because both of you are getting an echo?
Do people have questions for Sam?
Hi.
Go ahead,
Hello.
Nelly.
Okay. I don't remember the specifics, but some time ago I was trying to make a donation to Palestine, and they said there are no banks in Palestine. But you're saying there are banks in
I
Palestine.
sit on the board of one. Yes, there are about 12 banks in Palestine, I believe, or 13. They're regulated by something called the Palestine Monetary Authority, which is like our central bank. What there isn't is PayPal services. PayPal, for example, refuses to open accounts for Palestinians. They say that the Palestinian banking system is not kosher. When we proved to them it was, they changed their story and said, it's because your area is too small, not enough customers. So we went to their website and we found out that they have smaller territories that they provide services to. So we went back and told them that can't be true. And they changed their story yet again and said, our risk committee says it's too risky. So I went on LinkedIn and I looked up who their risk committee was, and most of them are based in Tel Aviv. So we understand now why they won't give us PayPal accounts. We have a campaign against PayPal. I actually spoke 2 years ago at their General Assembly trying to pass a resolution. If you go to Twitter or X or whatever it's called today and look up PayPal for the number 4 Palestine, you can see the entire campaign. I actually had an article in the Cleveland Plain Dealer about it as well.
Okay.
Dan, if you want to stop the recording, please do.
What's that?
You can probably stop the recording.
You want me to stop it? Okay, I can.
I don't think.
think it is.